Are you unable to concentrate on the tasks at hand? Do you need help focusing more or leveling up your game? Here's a tip. Try Cognizin Citicoline, clinically studied to support mental energy, focus, memory, and attention. Cognizin supports brain health and supplies the brain with the energy it needs to stay sharp. Cognizin is a leading nootropic, featured in over 200 products. This podcast is powered by Cognizin. Visit cognizin.com to learn more and find a product to help you fuel your day. Ready to achieve great heights? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to Power Your Performance, the podcast where we dive deep with leaders in the gaming world and beyond and learn the techniques they use to power their lives. I am your host, Gary Kleinman. Welcome, Jeannie Koulizakis, to Power Your Performance.
Hello. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Gary.
It is my pleasure to have you. It is my pleasure to pronounce your name properly, and I've been practicing for a day and a half, so I appreciate that. Now I don't have to bring it up again, so it's a good day. I got to tell you, I've been telling people in advance in my own circle of influence, the kind of people that are coming on and who's been on. And when I talk about ergonomics, everyone goes, "Oh God, I got to hear about this. I just have to hear about that," because I think there is so much pain and suffering going on. Forget gaming; we'll get into gaming, but just the pain and suffering with the overabundance of every kind of screen, of every kind of size. And I think I had mentioned it to you. If I didn't, I now have a trigger thumb that just got an injection. We'll get another one in another week and a half. And I never in my wildest imagination thought that I would be running around with clicking in my fingers and thumbs from the way that I use devices. So welcome. We're going to get to that. But the first thing I love to do, I actually haven't done this in a while. What was the first concert you ever went to?
Oh my God, the Police.
The Police. There you go. It's great insight. If you ever want to, cut ice on a meeting, you go around the table and you say, "Hey, what's the first concert?" I remember being in a meeting and somebody said Menudo, and it was the general manager and his entire staff just busted up, right? And I heard from him many months later. He goes, "You know what? You humanized me in front of my team faster than." And I looked at it and I said, "Menudo? Really?" I said, "You couldn't have lied and come up with something else." But so it's the Police, and that says a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
Long time ago.
A long time ago.
Yes.
But it's fun to ask. Ergonomics.
What was yours? What was yours,
mine?
Gary?
Elton John.
Oh,
Elton John. I'm not going to give you the year. It was Elton John when he first came to the United States.
Very nice.
And it was very cool. It was very cool then. So that was a good one to start out with. And I think it's all gone downhill from then in my choice of music. And especially if you ask my children, they'll agree with that. Physiology is your passion in your life, right?
Physiology, anatomy. I mean, I'm a physical therapist, so yeah.
So where did that come from? I mean, where's that first start? Where were you? And you go, "Hey, the body matters and I'm going to be an expert in it."
So my father was an orthopedic surgeon. And so I grew up, licking envelopes for his billing every month. My sisters answered the phones. My mom did the accounting,
of course,
/ medical assisting. It was, it was the Partridge Family, the medical edition.
Oh, that's so cute.
And it was enough to turn me off to medicine because it was especially orthopedics. It's a very brutal discipline. He had to do rounds in the ER. So we used to see the trauma and I couldn't stomach the trauma. And about 15 years into his practice. So, when I was in high school, he and a couple of his fellow orthopedic surgeons opened up a PT clinic because they understood the importance of rehab. Not every surgeon refers their patients to physical therapy, which is criminal as far as I'm concerned. But my dad was very progressive that way. Yeah. And so, I started working there, and then I turned away from that, as all kids do, because it was too much my own rebellion. So I went to Purdue, and I actually studied advertising at an engineering school. I was whimsical with my words. So I studied advertising copy, communications. And then when I, finished that, there was just no enthusiasm. And when I finished college, I came back to Washington, D.C., which is, Northern Virginia, which is where I grew up, and went right back into the clinic and thought, you know what, this doesn't suck. And this is I don't see the doom and gloom. I see them after they're sewn up. This clinic is full of music and happy people. And, in lieu of the winning lottery ticket, if I have to work for the rest of my life, this is a lovely
way to do it.
Path. Yeah. And there will never be a bad time to know what this teaches you. So
no, without a doubt. Listen, I've had 6 knee surgeries, so I understand the the value of PT, and this is not about me, but I'm not getting a knee replacement because I'm a baby, and that's just the way it is until I have to. I won't. And so you start with the PT, right? And you go to school for that, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I went to school for that, and then I moved to Chicago after I finished PT school. Worked at the Cubby Bear as a bartender to pay off my school loans, but eventually made it back to PT about 2 years later. And go Cubs! And
great stadium.
And yes, and started there. Doing occupational health. So I was doing a PT for, basically blue collar workers. And about 10 years into that, I came back, got married, started a family, and decided to come back to Washington, D.C. And there are not a lot of blue collar workers, right? Bureaucracy has the word desk right in it. So I transitioned from blue collar workers to basically desk jockeys. And that was in about 2000 and maybe like 10, 11.
Okay.
And which was really when our behavior sociologically, just, the first world nations really started taking to, cell phones became affordable. Handheld devices started to become affordable. Kids started getting electronics in schooling. So we started to see this mass spike in hours per daily use of electronics use right around the same time where I was, treating in an outpatient urban environment, seeing people who had injuries that they didn't understand, why they were happening or why they were not healing. And eventually it came fully obvious to me that it had everything to do with the way that they were interacting with gravity during electronics use, and that there had to be a better way. And what I also learned at that time is that physical therapists don't do any of this research.
No.
The people who do that research are environmental health and safety folks, furniture companies, because as a PT, I'm science driven, right? Everything I'm supposed to teach has to be evidence based. And actually, one of the epiphany moments that I had was it was my job to make instruction pamphlets on how to adjust your car seat and also how to adjust your office chair. And what was striking to me was how different the sitting positions were for one versus the other. The sitting position, it's very much like a car seat. Your legs are extended, your feet are on an angled platform, your knees are in an open position, 120 degrees, your hips are back, you're slightly reclined, you've got your headrest, and your steering wheel is placed in such a way that your shoulders, elbows, everything's relaxed. But yet in the office, it was this 90-degree upright and elbows at 90 degrees and knees at 90 degrees and everything at 90 degrees. And I thought, what's that about? How is gravity different in a car seat than it is in an office chair.
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, who thinks about that? But yes, without a doubt.
Right. So I started to really delve into that research. Why is one group telling us to sit like this for prolonged sitting, and the other one is telling us to sit like this for occupational sitting, we'll call it. And so it comes to find out, basically what I learned was that the correct way is the way that car seats and cockpits are designed to this day, with the slight recline, with the legs at a very particular, legs and hips, ankles, knees, hips, low back, everything oriented in a very specific way. It's still dynamic, but it's still not upright, right? Right. It does need to be at a bit of a recline for intervertebral disc pressure reasons, right? So
the car seat, for the most part, is better. Is correct.
Yes, is more musculoskeletally efficient. It decelerates compression-related disorders. It significantly slows down spine compression related disorders. So, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I used to be 6'1". Now, now I'm 5'10". Right. You hear people talk about how they shrink.
That's my excuse, but it happened at birth. So I can't blame it on my car seat, but that's okay. I'll blame it on my parents instead.
Yeah.
But you're saying what's interesting, because you mentioned the cockpit, right?
Yeah.
But the passenger seats in the planes are not. They're not either a car seat nor a cockpit.
They're also not designed to be used for 8 hours a day every day. So they are designed for making money. The spacing, the positioning is minimum comfort requirements for short durations. And that's the thing that you have to understand, is that pain, disorders, knee problems, thumb problems, all your computer use related, spine and joint degeneration issues, disorders, stem from something we call your total exposure. Okay, that's the number one risk factor. How many hours a day are you interacting with monitors, whether it's in your hand, on your desktop, laptop, Kindle, whatever. Okay. Right. It's about your total exposure. So if your exposure is only 2 or 3 hours for a flight 1 to twice a month, then that's not really where your problem is. That's not where you need to focus your ergonomic, redesign efforts. You really need to focus your redesign efforts, or your built environment redesign efforts, and your behavioral efforts in the space in which you find yourself parked most of the time. So there are people that have a primary workspace, a secondary workspace, a tertiary. Right. So you have like the typical, college graduate who, comes out, they get a job, they're working at it 8 hours a day, but at night they're pursuing their grad degree. So during the day, they're in the office, at night, they're at home on a laptop. So, you really start to, at least in my practice, in my ergonomics consulting business, we really focus on, if the number one risk is total exposure, then let's hit that one spot in which you spend the most time, so that it can forgive if you spend other time in less ergonomic conditions, because at least your primary is therapeutic.
Right. So, I'm going to jump ahead. We're going to come back to kind of your chronology. But when you're just telling me that, COVID then must have been a major intrusion in terms of people for years are going to work, and they have an environment there that may be scientifically designed and what have you. And now for 2 years is sitting at home, remote working, in what would probably not be a better environment physiologically. And that's got to have impacted people for the 2 years into, working out of their bed, right? And I know a lot of people that go, yeah, my daughter being one of them said, yeah, we're on a call in bed right now, right? Kind of thing. And that has to have then increased pain and discomfort during COVID as a result of that.
So, yes. I mean, in brief, of course, right? So, I mean, to get a little bit more, to hone in a little bit, again, speaking of total exposure, right? So if your total exposure to poopy ergonomic conditions becomes greater, then the rate of degenerative conditions starts to accelerate. Because again, low back pain, chronic low back pain doesn't happen overnight. Neck pain, your thumb problem, it doesn't happen overnight. They are degenerative, slow moving icebergs, right?
Right.
And what we saw was that the rate of degenerative changes escalated. So, somebody who was hobbling along okay, tolerating a knee problem, tolerating a hip arthritis, all of a sudden was incapable of tolerating any inefficiencies, any prolonged sitting, because it was simply too painful.
Right.
Now, just because you have a nice chair, because to address the other part that you said, well, at office, we have better ergonomic conditions, hogwash. So they might have better equipment, but they don't necessarily have better ergonomic conditions, because best ergonomic conditions are the postures you assume and the movements that you partake in. It's like brushing and flossing, right? So there's ideal ways to sit. There's ideal positioning as they position you in a car seat, as all car seats are designed for you to sit in a very specific way. And then there's ideal movement patterns, which is every 30 minutes, you're supposed to activate the glutes for cardiovascular maintenance, right? Again, this is nothing to do with how active you are outside of your electronics use. This has nothing to do with your macro wellness, as I like to call it. This is about workplace hygiene. That's it. Just like we brush and floss to prevent tooth decay, we engage in ideal postures and movement patterns to prevent computer-based work-related spine and joint decay. That's it. Okay. It's a seatbelt. Your other values don't matter here.
No, and I appreciate that.
Right.
And then somewhere, because I don't want to skip over your history and your chronology, and then at some point you go to Yahoo, correct? Were you
AOL?
AOL. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That was alarming.
And how did that come about? Because what you did there, I find fascinating, and then we'll segue into gaming and the total workplace environment in which you manufacture and what have you. But let's talk about the AOL aspect.
So in around 2015, what we saw in companies was generally on the clinic side, because I was still in the clinic. I had never had a job since PT school outside of bartending, outside of a PT clinic. And I knew inside the PT clinic that there was a problem outside in this place called corporate America and the federal government, because I'm in Washington, D.C. So again, offices, the office space had a problem. And so like many of my colleagues, we would write letters of recommendation for this patient needs a standing desk. This patient needs an ergonomic desk. We were writing the dreaded letter that the HR person would receive and go, what? Hey, my back hurts, so I'm going to get this kid an ergonomic chair while I'm going to go get, spine injections after work. There was, we're writing letters to HR professionals about, ergonomic needs, which again, just stupid. Okay. But AOL was a little more progressive, and they had an environmental health and safety department, and they had contracted a specialist in ergonomics, because they knew what they didn't know. That's what good companies do. They know what they don't know, and they know when to outsource. And you fill the gap, no question. You fill the gap with people that do. Fill the gap.
Without a doubt. That's what good companies do.
Right. So AOL, I was writing these letters, and I knew at that time that I was like, I just feel like there's a missing link. There's some synapse that's not firing between the people that take care of the health of these employees outside the office and the people who take care of the health inside the office. Like there's a missing link here. So I started looking for work, and I knew that I actually started looking for certification courses for physical therapists. Like how does a physical therapist become certified in ergonomics? Like how does this work? And it turns out there's pretty much none. There is one, it's a weekend course. I did take it.
That's crazy.
But there is no real certification. And then if you look globally at OSHA's requirements for ergonomic certifications, you also find out there's no governance on this. If you want to call yourself an ergonomist, you can
do that.
You can do that.
Oh, I might just do that. I might start doing that on Monday.
Yeah, good. Right. Okay,
I need a new certification and a degree, so I think I'm going to do that.
It works.
I appreciate the permission to allow me to do that starting on Monday.
There's no one that can stop you. Okay. And I found a lady who had a company, and she was looking for subcontractors, and so I filed for this position, and what it was my job to go in there, and AOL was having a very specific problem for years that they had, or for from 2010 when standing desk sort of came to be,
right, and
2015. The policy was you had to have a letter from a doctor saying that you needed this thing. Well, in 2015-ish, a company called Veridesk came about with this thing that you sit on top of a desk that goes up and down, that black thing that goes up and down. And it's, $500 versus the $3,000 that standing desks used to cost back then. And so many of these young kids and folks were asking for them that they finally said, you know what? We don't need letters from doctors. It's so inexpensive. We'll just let you have it. So the policy became no more letters from doctors, which was, of course, a decision driven by HR, who no longer wanted to receive those letters. And about 6 months later, people started wanting them off their desks. They were like, never mind, I don't like this. It's now in the way. And so they started getting letters again from doctors for more ornate ergonomic things. And AOL was like, wait a minute, what is the right answer here? We don't even know what to do. So it was my job to go to AOL and figure out what the problem was with these things called converter solutions. And could we fix it somehow so that they still didn't need to get letters from doctors? And so that's what I did there. I basically analyzed. I did two things there. I analyzed the problem. I figured out what the problem was with these standing desk, converter solutions. This was around the same time when sitting's the new smoking, right? And everybody was like, oh, everybody, the way you fix sitting is you simply get rid of the chair, duh. And listen, I was on that bandwagon. I was right up there thinking, okay, yeah, that makes sense, until I started to understand what the long-term, again, these are slow-cooked, slow-baked degenerative conditions. They don't happen overnight. And so the consequences of the converter solutions it took about 6 months, 6 to 8 months, depending on how active the employee was with the desk, to really see what the long-term consequences of the use of that device was. Okay.
Right. So,
and
no, I mean, it's fascinating. In the time we have left, I do want to take all that history and depth of experience and education and apply it to gaming. I mean, the one thing is running skins.gg, we have supplements to address some of these things. The anxiety, which is some of that is related to your physical condition. Certainly the pain, back, shoulders, neck, arms, hands, fingers, thumb. I mean, it's all over the place, and it's great that there are companies like Skins that address that with supplements. But what specifically are you recommending for gamers to do on two fronts? One of which, if they have an unlimited budget, they can obviously create an incredible, wonderful environment. And if they don't, what do they do?
So I will preface this by saying this, and I've said this already. Gravity doesn't care what you're doing, whether you're gaming, writing a term paper, it doesn't care. if you are interacting with electronics, the hygiene, the hygiene best practices is the same. Ideal postures, ideal movement patterns. Okay. Again, work-life balance, not included. Values, not included. So with gaming, obviously, and we don't have to go into this, because even though the average gamer now is, in their 30s or whatever else, that's still pretty young. And remember that even a 30 years old is what we consider the youngest digital native. So this is a cohort of human beings that have had handheld devices in their hands since birth. Okay.
No question.
Everyone over 30 has can't really empathize with that musculoskeletal uprearing. It's like a bonsai tree. We all had some sort of, stick and rope around us, and they've had none. Okay. And when they're young, it's not really consequential. But as they get to 30 and 40.
Well, there's no question. I mean, you said the average age of a gamer is 37, and it is split almost equally 50-50 men and women.
Right.
So do you look at that today and say the 16, 17, 18-year-old extended gamer has a different education that needs to be imparted to them versus the 37-year-old who's having general life degeneration? And where do they find the messaging for proper posture, proper hand positioning, leg positioning? Is that information even readily available? And if not, why not?
The reason why not is because of conflicting financial interests, right? So the reason why is because right now gaming is done in furniture, desks and chairs, right?
Right.
And there are competing corporate interests in selling those desks and chairs. And so if you are an outside party who comes in and says, hey, that desk and chair is not the best built environment for that particular person, there's evidence that shows that people sitting in your desks and chairs actually have toxic postures and movement patterns. They're not going to broadcast that. And, there's so much misinformation and so much gadgetry and so much snake oil salesmanship that goes on around this discussion. I mean, you talk about how you have supplements and whatever else. I mean, what a loud space to have to compete, right? There's so many people who have,
there's no question. It's a cluttered market.
It's a cluttered market.
And the audience is uneducated. So
right.
We go through this all the time on messaging. We spend a lot of time in education, more than we do on almost anything else, and especially the younger gamer is invincible in their own mind, right? So they're not real apt to raise their hand and say, "Oh my God, I'm not as flexible as I thought I was," but whatever, I'm going to take nothing, maybe an aspirin. The older folks are saying, hey, life has worn me down in addition to my chair and my desk and my mouse and what have you. So in an uneducated environment, and this is hopefully what we can impart with the time that we do have left, is on a minimal basis, what can gamers do at any age to improve or zero out the negative effects of gravity? And on a higher level, what can they do to improve their workspace, get a better chair, and what's that range in between?
So this discussion is very akin to teaching children about brushing and flossing. I always tell people, if you make it to the sink twice a day with a $5 toothbrush, you will have better teeth in the long run than somebody with a $300 toothbrush who never makes it to the sink. So it's not about, so I disagree that it is about how much you spend. It's about definitely having a minimum viable workstation, which I will describe here in a second.
Okay.
And again, engaging in what we call ideal postures and patterns, and creating an environment that is conducive to optimizing those two conditions. So at the very least, a decent chair, and it should be called an ergonomic task chair. So people who are searching need to find an ergonomic task chair. And if they are outliers, the sizing of that chair matters. So if they are 4'8", then it's going to be a different chair than somebody who's 6'2". So you also have to look for those sort of outliers. So just as some people have AAA feet or triple E wide, there are, the size of the chair being
so a chair is not a chair. I mean, if a chair is not a chair, is a chair. It does need to conform to who you are. It needs to
conform to the size, because the location of the lumbar support and the location of the head support, just like the orthotic in your shoe has to have the curve in the correct space for the arch, and that's based on your shoe size, the location of the lumbar support and the location of the cervical support is contingent on how tall that torso is. So chairs are made based on, on those measurements. Now, most chairs are made to fit, they aim for 80% of the population, and the outliers are screwed. Right?
Yep, right.
But then there's the Hokas and the New Balance of the industry that makes, correctly sized chairs based on the height of the person. And my personal favorite, of course, is the Herman Miller Aeron, because it comes in 3 sizes. It was designed pre-NAFTA. And so they were more concerned with the ergonomics and less about manufacturing costs. So that's why a lot of their chairs, that particular company, Herman Miller, but, the person who was running that company at that time, and the people who are running it now, which are more marketing experts, not ergonomics experts the way they used to be, they are running on the brand, right? They're running on fumes when it comes to that, but they're pretty good fumes, because the chairs were built and designed in a timeless fashion, because the human being hasn't changed very much since the 1980s and 90s when those chairs were developed. They have some competitors, Steelcase and whatever else, but really that is the, Tesla of office chairs.
Right.
And if you fit the rest of the workstation around it correctly, then you're really looking at a piece at a workstation, or at least a chair that can last you a good 2 decades, if you take care of it and whatever else, just like a car, right?
Right. Which then becomes an investment and not a purchase.
It does become an investment, but at the other end, so if you're a parent who's like, well, I don't have, $800 to spend on an office chair for my kid, then the other option is to get less, like shoes for your kids. Okay, you're going to get them at Walmart, but be prepared to buy one every year. You know what I mean? You're going to have to buy them with greater frequency, and same thing, kids' office chairs is a totally different discussion. And because I have an 11 and a 7-year-old, so this is a particularly, that could be its own discussion. All right.
It's a great idea, and I'm going to take you up on that.
Yeah. Yes. And the pandemic was nothing but an R&D fest in here. So, we really, and the way that they are set up now is absolutely the best. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you got to remember, orthopedics means correction of the child. That's what orthopedics means.
Oh, does it really? That's so funny.
Right. So the sooner that you get the stick and the rope around their growing trunks, then the better, the more fruitful, the less stress they will be in. You talk a lot about stress and pain, and you're absolutely right. And that is my wheelhouse, right? Everything that we do in the clinic, everything that we do for gamers, everything that we do for workers, people interacting with electronics, our success of ergonomic interventions is judged by a change in pain levels. That's how we measure our success at my company, ErgoRx.
Well, but that's how life is Judge, right? Most people don't change behavior until the pain is so great that you change because you want to get rid of the pain. And that's true in relationships, physical, emotionally, and everything else. So, yeah, pain is a driving force pain
is a driving force unless you're talking about brushing and flossing, which is very interestingly taught to children at 2 years old, because enough pain happened in their predecessors for them to understand the value of prevention. Or the earlier, the better, the intervention, the education, the training. The problem is we have not gotten there yet with children and with ergonomics, because the 30-year-olds of today, the 37-year-olds have yet to become 80. Once they become 80 and they personally understand and can empathize finally with the consequences of what happens due to poor hygiene habits at a younger age, it's not going to become main focus. Right now, what I have in my wheelhouse, the people that I treat, the people that come to me seeking solutions for their children's gaming and whatever else, are what we call early adapters, people who are smart enough to understand that this matters, that you don't have to wait until you have a mouthful of cavities and whatever to understand the value of prevention. So, that's the issue right now. But if there's anything I can impart, I would say ideal postures, which is basically replicating what you see in car seat design. I mean, if you look up, car seat design, human factors and images, you will see a person in a slight recline with a very specific, oh yeah, that's how I sit in a car, right? And that's really what you want to replicate in terms of positioning. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, one of the things that happened from AOL was I developed proprietary equipment that we later on had tested at Cornell University to prove that it was both healthy in terms of postures and movement patterns. And it was found to be an incredibly hygienic design. It's, we use it to optimize positioning in whatever office chair and desk that you have. We teach people how to position their hands, their feet, their monitors, their desks if they have them. You don't necessarily have to have a desk. Not everybody games, in a desk. If you have handheld equipment, stuff like that. But that's like, trying to describe how you custom fit a suit. It's just, it's hard to, without pictures, it's hard to, without the person in front of you, to sort of explain that process. But there is a customized sort of like fitting yourself, just like when you get into a rental car, the first thing you do is you adjust the seat, you adjust the recline angle, you adjust the mirrors, you adjust the steering wheel. The same needs to happen in your workstation. And a lot of people don't even know well enough to do that, or how to do it, or what should the goal be? How do I know if it's right? I will tell you, here's the secret. Comfort is your guide. That's it. If it's comfortable to you,
it's probably going to be okay.
Then it's correct. Right. Exactly. That's, discomfort leads to pain. So if you are in a state of the absence of discomfort, then you're not going to get to pain. So the thing that triggers changes in positions when you are gaming is pain. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be something else. Understanding that every 30 minutes you do have to engage the glutes, but there are ways of engaging the glutes. Like I will show you how I engage the glutes while sitting in a chair. So you disengage, you elevate, you increase the space between the vertebrae. I mean, again, it's a minimal decompression maneuver, but it's better than nothing.
Nothing, right? without a doubt.
So there are things that you can do, and I'm twisting in the chair right now. I'm articulating my feet. I'm, swinging. I'm not static, but I'm also not forward leaning and looking down into my laptop. So there are best practices for movement as well as posture.
Jeannie, thank you so much. Incredibly informative. I'm sure everyone's going to take away notes and go, I got to start doing this, but I'm going to take you up. I think it's fascinating to do another session for the kids, right?
Yes.
And parents as gatekeepers to understand how to put good practices in as early as possible.
As early as possible. That's right.
Thank you so much for your time. We will be
welcome.
In touch, and sit healthy.
All right. And move often.
Thanks, Jeannie.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. This podcast is part of the MAP Esports Podcast Network and produced by Innovation Media Enterprises. Please be sure to leave us a review and follow us on your favorite podcast player.